Well, here's the thing we saw. I kind of shared a little bit last week how the story of Jonah was also the inspiration, likely an inspiration of some of Jesus' parables. One of the things I was thinking of this, a story has a way of inspiring other stories. And really, there's only a few basic plots that are out there. You know, have you ever gone to a movie and you're like, I feel like I've seen this movie before, even though it's a new movie, and it's just really just a new movie doing a remake of an old movie that nobody knows about? So here's the thing. For a Starbucks card, and you got to raise your hand, okay? Does anybody know what inspired the movie Star Wars? The name of the movie that inspired the movie Star Wars. See, George Lucas didn't sit down with like a blank piece of paper. He actually even admits that there's this movie that inspired him greatly in the creation of Star Wars. Lost in Space? Maybe that was an inspiration, but not the one he said. All right, Dave, come on, Dave. What is it? No, I haven't heard that one. Oh, you're super close, Michael. All right, does anybody got it, or you giving up? Giving up? It's a Japanese film. And it's a Japanese film called The Hidden Fortress. There it is. You were so close. So close. All right, here's another one. How about The Hunger Games? What movie inspired The Hunger Games? What movie? Oh, you're super duper close. This is just what I heard her say. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe that too. Just take a guess. Yeah, now you can just guess. No, not Braveheart. Definitely not Braveheart. According to the creator of The Hunger Games, no, it was Spartacus. And which Spartacus is just a different version of probably Battle Royale, which is a different version of the Arnold Schwarzenegger. Which one was that? Not Blade Runner. What was that one where he was trapped in a game show? Running Man, that's it. You know, so again, inspiration inspires another thing. Now here's the thing. How about The Lion King? Boom! Kimba! Oh, that's your card. There's your card. And they didn't just inspire it. They actually totally ripped it off. They just totally stole it. Like there's like these, I can picture these Disney execs, and they're like, yeah, let's steal that Japanese film that nobody in the United States has ever watched. It's Kimba. And let's name the character, I don't know, what do you think? Simba. I mean, they weren't even trying. At least they should have named him like Bruce or something like that. All right, last one, last chance. Avatar, sorry. Avatar. Boom, Dances with Wolves. It is Dances with Wolves in Space. Watch them side by side. Same exact movie. I can't believe that they didn't sue them. They probably actually did. So like I said last month, the book of Jonah is a story of this wayward prophet who seems to have been the influence behind Jesus' probably his most famous parable, at least one of the two most famous parables, and that is the story of the prodigal son. See, both stories, what they do, they both force us to gaze at God's amazing grace. Whether you are a sinner in the story or whether you are a saint in the story, it requires you to respond to what you hear in the story that has been told to us. So I thought this is kind of an interesting Sunday because Jonah's over. We finished Jonah chapter 4 last week. And then next week we start the new series. And I was like, what am I going to do? I got a weird Sunday in between. This like never happens to me. And then it occurred to me, wouldn't it be kind of fun to actually look at the story that flowed so naturally from the story of Jonah, to look at the story of the lost sons in Luke 15. So that's what we're going to do today. So as we do this, we're kind of really continuing this theme of gazing at the good grace of God and continuing to ponder the themes that we found in that amazing book that we'll also see in this amazing story. A little bit of context to when the parable was told. There was an occasion to the parable being told, as most of Jesus' stories were. Luke 15, 1 through 2, we see this. It says, now tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. I think it's funny, like, tax collectors and sinners, you know, like if you worked for the IRS, you would be in the tax collector and sinner group. So they're all excited. They're part of this thing. They're coming to hear from Jesus. Then there's this But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." You may remember high school. This is so high school right here. When I was in I don't think things have changed. I've been out of high school for over 20 years, but I imagine it's probably still the same way. Back when I was in high school, I was a skater. So I knew clearly where the skaters ate lunch. And I knew clearly where the jocks ate lunch. And I knew clearly, they were the cowboys, but we called them hicks. I'm sorry if you're a cowboy. The hicks ate lunch over here. You know, everybody, you know where everybody eats lunch. And it was always, you know, I did actually bounce between a couple groups, but it was always really weird when there was like the people that never crossed paths. And then sometimes like if a hick came and just was hanging out with the skater, I was like, what's this guy doing over here? Is he picking a fight? Or is he actually, no, they're actually talking. You know, it always kind of catches your eye. So this is really that. See, everybody in this point can find their place at the table right now. You have the morally good and you have the morally bad. The morally good are angry with Jesus because he, in their eyes, was morally good, and yet he was associating himself with those who were seen as morally bad. They're saying, what is Jesus doing? He's crossing these cultural, social lines that you're not supposed to cross. If you are a morally bad person, you're not allowed at the table of rabbis. You're not allowed at the table of those who are morally good. So they grumbled about it. They're upset about it. And this launches Jesus into a series of short stories, all that capture God's love for lost things. The first two stories are pretty short stories. The parable of the lost sheep, where the shepherd went out they had 99, he left the 99 to go find the one. And the parable of the lost coin, where a little old lady swept her whole house to find one little penny that was lost. And then the third parable is about two sons. One morally good, one morally bad. Convenient considering the audience Jesus is speaking to, isn't it? But both, we're going to find out in this story, are equally lost. See, I think it's funny because if I were to say, what's this parable's name, what would you say this parable is called? The prodigal son. Singular. Isn't that interesting? Even in our culture, we still find ourselves reading this story as if only one son is lost. Only the morally bad one is lost. We're still the Pharisees. We're just like them. Maybe it's time we listen to Jesus' words more completely. See, both brothers in this story are lost because we're going to find out that both brothers were far from their father's heart. So, Act 1. Verses 11 through 12. Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." Now the son's request here is absolutely crazy. Imagine all you parents in the room. Imagine your son or your daughter walking up to you and saying, "Dad, Mom, I wish you were dead so I can have your stuff." That statement is equal to exactly what's happening right here in the story right now. You would absolutely be blown away, wouldn't you? You would be stunned. It would be reprehensible that your son, your daughter would say such a thing. You would want me dead so you can have my stuff? Are you kidding? See, it would shock you. And Jesus' words in this story are meant to be shocking. Now, what does the father do? Now, if this were me, again, I shared, I'm so glad I'm not Jesus. It would be rough go for all of us. If that were me, I'd be, are you kidding? How about, I have a better idea. How about we go to the lawyers right now and I take you out of my will? But not this father. It says this, so he divided his property between them. So he does it. The son asks, I want my share of the stuff now because I don't want to have to wait till you kick the bucket. So what do you say? And he does it. See, already Jesus is setting up this father in the story as unlike anybody's father that has ever existed. He's unlike anybody that were around that table that day. None of their dads were like this dad. And just as any here who's heard the story sense, none of our dads are like this dad. Because God is a father who is unlike any father. You see, you may have had a cruddy dad, but God is not like your dad. He's far from it. You may have had a great dad. You say, my dad was one of the best. But even the greatest dads compared to God, they're bums compared to God. They're bums compared to God's goodness. He is unlike all of us because he is absolutely perfect always. He is not a pushover, and he's also not heavy-handed. He's always at work for your well-being, and that's exactly what we see him doing here. This son's crazy request is meant with a crazy response because this father is working for his son's well-being. See, Jesus paints a picture of a father who doesn't reject his son because of this question, because of this request, but who endures rejection himself by giving the son what he wants. The father gave his son the belongings he asked for because he knew something about his son. He knew that his son did not have his heart. He knew that his son did not care for his father's heart. And so refusing to give him his request and just keeping him around longer would never turn this boy's heart towards his dad. So the father let him go. And this is a huge point here. See, the father will not force his love on any of his children. But he invites us to freely choose his love and to receive his love gladly and willingly into our lives. The Father who we serve has an open door saying, come one and come all and enjoy my love. But he'll never force his love on any of us. Isn't that odd? Because he understands. A heart that's forced to love isn't love. We have to choose it. Verses 13 through 20, it goes on to say this, not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and set off for a distant country. And there he squandered his wealth in wild living. Does this shock anybody? That's the only part in the story that we kind of expect, isn't it? You know, people that would have the audacity to say something like this to their dad, they're not going off and having a nice 401k. You know, budgeting their money wisely and living a real nice, peaceful life, quiet existence. It rarely happens like that. Usually it's like this. It's, give me what I want right now so I can go do what I want. And then pretty soon it's gone and you're like, surprise. Listen to this next part. After he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. See, the son is realizing something. The son soon discovers that life apart from the father, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. See, some of us have lived in seasons of rebellion. And what is it that exactly brought you back? You realize that the rebellion is not all that it's cracked up to be. It's a fantasy, it's a mirage, and we chase the things that we think we want only to find out that those things are the very things that are killing our souls. And we realize this, and he's coming to his senses, hitting rock bottom. His rebellion has left him financially broke, so much so he can't even eat. But even worse, what has happened is his rebellion has caused him to become broke spiritually and emotionally. Now, where are his partying friends now? Where is everybody? It says no one. There's nobody in this world in his current context that cares enough about him to even give him something to eat. Like the base amount of what we can do. Feed somebody to sustain them enough to live. Nobody cares. Where is everybody? See, there's people around you, if truth be told, simply put, do not love you. They will tell you that they care for you. But once they've consumed you completely and you have nothing left to offer them, what happens? They typically disappear, don't they? They're typically gone because you don't have anything left to give them. See, who are those in your life that really, truly love you? Stop and think about that for a moment. Who are those who are there for you, whether you have something to offer them or not? Maybe you have nothing to offer them at this phase of your life. And they're perfectly okay with that because they love you for you. That's the way it has been. That's the way it will always be. See, who is willing to let you go if necessary in order to win you back forever? When you've identified that group of people, those are the people that you need to get yourself around. Single people, that's the type of person that you need to marry. This is the type of person we all need to become. People who can love other people unconditionally. Find those people in your life and keep them close to you. Thank God for them. Tell them that you're thankful for them because they are a grace from God. See, this young man, he's isolated himself by his choices. He's now been abandoned by the people that he thought were his friends just because he had a lot of money. It's easy to make friends when you flash a lot of money around, isn't it? Ask NFL stars who got a lot of money how easy it is. NBA stars, how easy it is to have friends when you have a lot of money. Ask lotto winners how easy it is to make friends when you have a lot of money. Now here he is broke with nobody and he's hungry. Now have you ever been so hungry that something that usually is nasty doesn't sound too bad anymore? Like, all right, day-old Taco Bell. I'm serious. Day-old Taco Bell is one of the nastiest things. There is no way you can reheat Taco Bell where it's delicious. I'm pretty convinced Taco Bell has about a 10-minute shelf life. If you don't eat it within 10 minutes, you might as well just pass because it's going to make you sick. It's going to make you sick either way you slice it. However, it's not going to taste good going down. There's been days where we've had day-old Taco Bell, sometimes 2 or 3 day-old Taco Bell, that's been left here at the church because we'll like do a cast thing for the crew that's working on a play, and we're like, hey, we're going to give it a Taco Bell because it's cheap, and we'll have a couple extra tacos, so we'll throw them in the fridge, and then come Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm really hungry, and I didn't have forethought to pack a lunch, so I'm like, man, I'm hungry. What's in the church fridge? There it is. Day-old Taco Bell. And I'm stupid enough sometimes to still eat it because it sounds good at the time because I'm so hungry. Here he is now, this guy, he's willing to eat the food of pigs. Now, this is, again, culturally, pigs, you know, we love pigs, don't we? They make the greatest bacon. We love them. They're good in ham sandwiches. Even yes, as pets, people have pet pigs. Imagine changing the story a little bit to something a little more reprehensible to us. Imagine rats. Imagine finding yourself in a sewer where rats are living. That's probably a better picture of what Jesus is intending. Imagine being so hungry that you'd be willing to eat the carcass of something that rats are nibbling on. That's the picture that Jesus is giving us here. That's how destitute and broken this guy is. But what you're willing to eat in moments like this is nothing compared to what you're willing to accept when you've been broken by your rebellion. Listen to what comes next. When he came to his senses, so he's looking around and looking at pig pods going, I could eat this. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. And he comes with this great plan. I'll set out and I'll go back to my father and I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you and I'm no longer even worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. See, the saddest part of rebellion is it causes us to exchange our sonship or daughtership. And I don't even know if daughtership is a real name or not, but I like it, so I'm going to keep with it. It causes us to exchange those things about who we are in the eyes of God, and we exchange it for servanthood. We exchange it for slavery. This is what shame always does. Always. Shame never drives us into freedom. It always either drives us further into the mess that we're at because we say, I just can't return home. I guess the pig pod sounds great, and we stay there. Or it never lets us find rest, even when we crawl back to home. Shame will make us live in a place, we're back at home, and we still don't feel like a son or a daughter because we've allowed shame to keep us running from the grace that God has for us. Grace is the only thing, living, breathing, and being in the grace of God is the only way to experience the fullness of what God has for each and every one of us. So the Son creates this plan to return to the Father, but not as a son. He'll return as a servant to work so he can pay off the debt that he owes his dad. And we all know that debt is absolutely unpayable. He'll never be able to pay off this debt. He'll just be working the rest of his life for room and board in his mind. But this is what we do when we come to the end of our rope, but still don't see grace as our way out. So we want to bargain with God, don't we? So we tell God, okay, God, here's the deal. If you do this, here's what I'm willing to do. If you do this, I'll go to church, like even that back to church blast thing that Pastor Jason is talking about. I'll even go to that. I'll let my kid throw a color bomb at my face if you just let this thing happen. So we bargain with God, right, as if he's a vendor to us. You say, if you will, I will. The thinking is that our good deeds and then somehow pay off God. And he's like, oh, they're doing enough good things. It's time to bless them now. See, this may be, and why I think, is why so many people get caught up in a cycle of rebellion. They return only to return to God just to do it again and again and again. And maybe that's you, and maybe you've observed somebody else doing this, and you go, what is going on? Why do they keep going back to the pig pen? What is happening? They might return for a while, but pretty soon the pressure to perform is just too much, and they're right back at it. See, because they've never really stepped into grace. What they're doing is they're trying to earn their salvation through performance. Grace is the only thing that will keep us. Grace is the only thing that will let us live and stand in our sonship and our daughtership to say, you know, I don't deserve a thing that I have, but God is so good. He still calls me his son, nonetheless. That's what stepping in grace does. Listen to the next part. He's heading home. I could picture him like, have you ever known, this is for the guys in there, you ever known you're going to be in trouble with the missus? And you kind of have you're saying, okay, and here's what I'm going to say. And you're like, you got your line, right? Is that, no guys in here but me. And you're like, okay, now, I'm ready. I got my line. I know what I'm going to say, And maybe it's the opposite in your guys' home, but, this is that. He's coming home, and he's like, okay, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say, right when he sees me, I'm going to say, Father, I don't deserve to be your son. Make me a servant. So he's practicing it as he's walking the whole way home. It says this in verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. There's that Jonah word, isn't it? Remember last week? This God of compassion who says, I can't help but to hurt when my children are far from me, because I am the God who chooses to knit my heart to another. Therefore, I feel the things that they feel. When they're glad, I'm glad. When they're sad, I'm sad. When they're in rebellion, I'm broken, because I'm the God who has compassion. And this is what Jesus says. The Father sees his Son with compassion. Why? Because his heart is knit to him. He's always had compassion for his son, even while his son was lost. So he sees him at the distance, and he goes on to say, he ran to his son. He threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. The son said to him, he's like, push play. Here's the script. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. What's the dad do? But the father said to his servants, quick! Bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and let's celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and he is alive again. He was lost and he is now found. So they began to celebrate. So the father, here's the father is, he sees him at a distance. What does he do? He sprints towards him. Now, back then, and which is truly right now, have you ever seen a rich person run? They don't do it. They're like, hey, son, here's $20. Run and get me a mocha. They don't run. They don't run now. They don't run then. You pay people to run for you. This father doesn't say, hey, servant, here's $20. Go run to my son. He doesn't do it. He hikes up his robe, because they would have worn long robes back then, in order to run, and he does something what no respectable male at this time would do. He shows his ankles. Woo! In the story here, the Pharisees would be going, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. There is no way that this guy would do this. And yet, this is the picture that Jesus is painting of the Father. The father who's looking out into the distance, longing with compassion for his son to return. And when he finally sees him at the distance, he runs towards him. He runs at him. He doesn't say, there he is. There's my son. I knew he'd become groveling back soon enough. I'm going to go inside and let him stew on a little bit and make him find me. Doesn't do it. He runs towards him. See, when your lost loved ones are found again and brought from death to life, who gives a rip about what's respectable, right? When we really view life from the way God views life, and we see that somebody is being born again, when somebody is crossing that line from death to life, it's the most glorious moments that exist in the universe. So who cares what's respectable? It's time to celebrate. So joy captures this father. It catches God up at the return of every single lost child. Every moment when somebody comes to God, God is in heaven doing a jig. He's dancing, and the angels are saying, is that respectable, God? He says, I don't care. My son is back. My daughter is back. And this is exactly what we heard from him when the Ninevites responded to Jonah's message. He's the God who sees the return of his loved ones with pure joy. See, this is how God felt when you surrendered your life to him. He was ecstatic. For some of you who are in this room right now who have been far off choosing the pig pen over the penthouse, God sees you in here today, and he sees you at the distance. Even though you feel far from God, he sees you, and he sees your progress towards him, and he is giddy about it. He's delighted about it. So what's the father do when he catches up to his son? He embraces him. I can picture him putting his finger on his lips, stopping him from this nonsense rant. Just make me a search. Nonsense. I'm going to clothe you in one of my royal robes. I'm going to put on a ring on your finger that marks that you are mine. I'm going to put royal sandals on your feet. See, he stops the silly attempt of the son to pay back his debts. The younger son, simply put, never stopped being the father's son. Even in the pig pen, he's still a son. So some of you may have a son or a daughter right now who are in the pig pen. And you know that they are still your son. They're still your daughter. Just because they're far from you and far from your heart, it doesn't mean that your heart is still not knit towards them. He was lost, and he was not experiencing the blessing of sonship, but now he's found. I would imagine that it might have taken this son some time to settle back into sonship, right? I imagine after the few coming weeks, he'd be like, walking in the house, kind of, can I get some food out of the fridge, Dad? And I know they didn't have fridges back then. I can figure, of course, have whatever you want. This is your home. You're my son. Remember that. Do you ever go to your friend's house? Like, how many people's houses do you go to and you just open up their fridge and get stuff out? There's very few people. My mom and John's house, all pillage their fridge. Shamelessly, just all this, anything in their fridge. Sometimes it's old leftovers and I regret it, but I will do it. The Geese's house, I'll go in their fridge and I'll look around. Hey, can we have some of this? I don't just eat it, but I ask, but I look. My kids in my own house, they don't go, look, hey, may I have such and such, may I have some toasted toast bread? It's like, it's of course eat. If it's time to eat, whatever you want, eat, right? See, sometimes we have to settle in to what it is to be a son or a daughter again. We have to accept the fact that what is spoken over us is an actual reality. See, this is what grace looks like. This is what grace tastes like. And sometimes it takes us a long time to learn how to walk in it and how to live in it. But soon enough, you'll remember how to be a son again. You'll remember how to be a daughter again instead of a stranger or a servant that you've made yourself to be. Second act, verse 25. Meanwhile. Whenever there's a meanwhile, you always know something bad's coming, right? If something good has happened and there's a meanwhile, uh-oh. The older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and he asked, hey, what's going on? Oh, your brother came home, he replied. And your father's killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. It's this picture right here. Like people will say Christians are boring. I don't want a relationship with God because that's boring. This is the picture of what heaven looks like. This is a picture of what we're invited to right now here on earth, to be able to experience heaven on earth. That this picture of being a child, a son or a daughter, invited around a table where there is constant celebration of God's goodness. The food that is provided isn't like the worst food you can provide because it's cheap. It's the best kind that is provided by God. He's saying there's lavish blessing in the house of the Lord. There is music, there's dancing, there's celebration, so much so that it should be heard from the hills. That people say, what's going on over there? Oh, it's a celebration of God and his love for us. That's what it should be. Listen to what happens next, the older brother. The older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. Isn't that an interesting word? All these years. How is the son who stayed home viewed himself? All these years, the son who stayed home viewed himself as a slave. As a servant, not as a son. I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. And you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? See, something's happening here. Jesus shows us that the older son was just as lost as the younger son. His heart was so far from the Father, he couldn't even tell how lost he was, even though he never left home. See, what is he angry about at this point? He's angry over the fattened calf. He's angry over stuff. See, this fattened calf would have been incredibly expensive, and it would have been a lavish gift given in celebration of somebody who didn't deserve it. And now this son, the quote, good son, is upset because he sees this as cutting into his inheritance. Remember, the father gave the wayward son that went off to the pig pens his inheritance. Everything from this day forward, this son is seen as his when the old man finally kicks the bucket. So any lavish act of generosity is seen in his eyes through a lens of greed, because he's saying, that's my fattened calf. That belongs to me. These things belong to me. I deserve it. I earned it. I worked for it. His son is angry because he wants his father's stuff just like the rebellious son did too. Rather demanding it like the younger brother, he thought he could obtain it through obedience. If I'm good, I'm entitled to the father's stuff. If I'm good, I deserve the father's blessing. See, for the older brother, moral goodness is a way to control the father. I'll be good and you are forced to do good things for me. I'll be good and I'll twist your arm and you'll be forced to pour blessings on me. So he thought that righteous actions put the father into his debt. See, he's just as lost as the other son. He's just as confused as the other son. Rather than rejoicing that his brother was home, the older brother is angry because his portion is being shrunk in his eyes. That calf of mine, that's my money being spent on a brother who doesn't deserve it. So who's closer to Jesus? The person who's drifting from God, who's seen by many as, quote, morally good, but they're drifting from God, and the relationship with God is now mostly checking boxes. The relationship with God is now stale and cold. The relationship with God, even though the exterior looks all right and kind of shiny, their relationship with God is drifting and their heart is moving farther from God. Or the person who's still rough around the edges from years of being away from God, but is moving towards God. The one who knows they don't deserve the party, but is willing to accept it anyway. Who's closer to God? See, be careful about judging other people's hearts who are returning to God. On the outside, they may look far from God, but your judgment of them might just reveal how far you are from God. It might be a moment that you have to stop and correct yourself and say, Lord, I am so sorry for judging my brother. I'm so sorry for judging a sister who is far from you, instead of having the same compassion that you have for them. Instead of rejoicing that they're coming towards you, instead of celebrating the goodness of God in their life, I'm sorry for judging them. So what's his son do? He insults the father by refusing to join the party. He's not going to do it. Now, this would have been just as insulting as the younger brother in the beginning of the story. He questions the father's generosity in front of his servants, and they would have gone in and said, did you hear what Chad said to his dad? And I really doubt his name was Chad, but let's roll with it. Did you hear him say that rebuke to his dad about this whole party in the first place? Can you believe it? It would be just as scandalous. And how does the father respond? Listen to this, verse 31 and 32. My son. Listen to that words. My son. He still addresses this wayward son who thought that he could, who wanted his father's stuff, who thought he could earn it through moral goodness, but wanted it nonetheless, and didn't want a relationship with his dad. He just wanted his stuff. And the dad still addresses him tenderly and lovingly, my son. The father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he's found. So what's the plea here? The plea is, son, join the party. Son, come be part of the festivities. Stop worrying about who deserves what. Because as children of the Father, everything that is the Father's is already yours. Wrap your head around that. Everything that is God's belongs to you through Jesus Christ. His word says that as children of God, we are co-heirs with Jesus. Everything that is Jesus's, as the rightful son, as the Son of God, belongs to us because we have been adopted into this family. So what does this truth do inside of our heart when we finally settle into it? It creates rest. See, no son or daughter has to worry about being cut out of the Father's love because we didn't toe the line well enough. It creates a rest inside of us to say, even when I screw up, I'm still his son. Even when I screw up, I'm still his daughter. He loves me, he loves me, he loves me, and he won't kick me out of his home. Your obedience now, it actually becomes the means to experience the fullness of the Father's love rather than the endless task of obtaining it. Do you understand that? I'm not saying obedience is unimportant. I mean, read the book of Jonah. We just saw, we spent a month seeing how important obedience is. But obedience is the means that we get to experience God's goodness in our life. It's alignment so that we can be recipients, not let other things get in the way of the Father's love poured into our life. So if everything that God has is yours, what do? You rest in it. You enjoy it. You join the celebration. See, this truth, what it does is it also restores the relationship not only of us to the Father, but us to the wayward brothers. So don't judge your brother because you too have been found just as guilty of trying to control the Father to get his stuff, to get his blessing. Rather, celebrate with the Father each and every time a fellow brother or sister is found. Join the party. Your life should be the most joyful life around because of what Jesus has done for us. Join the party. Join the celebration. Let your life be lived in such a way that draws other people into the Father's love, that they too may find a seat at the table. Now, this story ends abruptly, just like Jonah's story. Okay, what happened? What did the son do? Anybody want to finish telling the story, Jesus? We don't know what the brother did that day. We don't know if he said, I will not go into the party. I will not go down the hill and join the celebration for that wayward brother of mine. I won't do it. Or did this pep talk cause something to trigger inside of him where he realized, you know what, I should. You're right, Papa. You're right. But it doesn't matter what happened. What matters is what we choose to do. What matters is what happened when the Pharisees heard this story. And they looked at the tax collectors and they looked at the sinners around Jesus' table. And what was their response? That's why it's open-ended. It's a call not just to the lost sons who were far in the pig pen to come around the table, but the overly religious to say, stop trying to find joy in the Father just for his things and come and find your seat at the celebration as well. So what do? It's an invitation for all of us, and all of us can find our space, our spot somewhere in this story. So who are you in the story? Who are you in this moment in your life? Are you like the lost son that's living life in the pig pen? Or are you like the overly religious son who's never settled into grace? Who always feels that in the next moment the Lord is just going to kick you out and treat you like a bum? Who are you? I'll close with this. The worship team wants to come up. Like this story, we have a Father who is madly in love with us. And if you're outside of his love feast in any way, he's heartsick. He longs for your return. He longs for you to find your place at the table and enjoy the celebration. Unlike this story, we have an older brother who actually gives a rip. And his name is Jesus. He was perfect in obedience in every single way. And he left the Father's home when he knew that there was rebellious sons and daughters of the Father that were lost. And he left heaven. He stepped out of it to come and find us, to find us in our pig pen, to bring us back to the Father and back to the celebration. And it cost him dearly. He wasn't worried about what this would cost him. He gave everything for us. At the expense of his own life, our older brother, Jesus, sought us out to bring us home. So how will we respond? If we could stand to our feet, I'll close in prayer. Jesus, I imagine that every single one of us finds us as different characters of the story depending on the day that we are in. Sometimes we feel like the lost son who is rehearsing the lines, "Take me back and I'll just be a servant." Sometimes we find ourselves as the self-righteous son who thinks that we've got our act together, therefore we deserve the blessings of God, and others do not. Sometimes we find ourselves in this dynamic in between, living as one person in one moment and another person in the next. But God, my prayer is for every single one of us in here, myself included, that we would learn how to walk in the grace that has been offered us by Jesus Christ. That we would learn how to walk not as servants, not as slaves, but as sons and daughters of the living God, bought by the blood of Jesus to adopt us into this family, to have a seat at the table of God, to be part of a celebration that begins now and that echoes all the way into eternity. God, let us find our place in it with joy. Let us rest in it. Let us be glad in it. Let us live a life of obedience, not to twist your arm, but because through it we get to experience you even more. God, help us. Help us, Lord, with wandering hearts, God, to be tethered to you. Help us, God, with wandering hearts, to slow down enough to hear your words speak to us. Lord, we thank you once again, Jesus, for leaving eternity, leaving heaven, being born in the flesh, living the perfect life that we could never live, dying on that cross, taking our place in judgment so the judgment could pass from us. We thank you for rising again from the grave, that you were so powerful not even death could hold you. We thank you for ascending into heaven, seated at the right hand of the Father. We thank you that you are the soon coming King and you're coming back and you're bringing heaven with you. So Lord, let us look towards that day, remembering who we are and our part in this story. Set our hearts free. In Jesus' name we pray.